Well, welcome everyone to the 15th Annual Distinguished Architecture Alumni Award. My name is Glenn Leroy and I'm the Dean of the College of Architecture and Design, and I bring to you regrets from President Walker, who would be here tonight except that they are attempting to handle a zoning issue tonight with some of the neighbors about a project that we want to do, and they're having to go through that process of working with neighbors. But he would be here tonight. What I'd like to do first of all is just give you a brief report, since many of you are alums, about some of the things that are happening. Basically, the college continues to impress people around the United States and around the world. Our students in the last year and our faculty have won many awards, given many presentations, and continue to be leaders in the profession and leaders among colleges of architecture and design around the country. We are finding a little bit, and I hope that you all are part of, a little bit more robust employment opportunities for our students, which has been nice. Keep up the good work, everybody. And we've seen particular growth in our art and design programs here in the college. And particularly in areas like transportation design, and we just graduated our first graduating class of transportation design, and they all received job offers for really good pay, much more than architects pay, by the way. and all over, not only in Detroit, but around the world. We have them as far flung as from Detroit to Paris, working in Peugeot. So we're really proud of them. We're now kicking off a new game art program, and whenever you say game art to high school kids, their eyes light up. You mean, I can actually design video games, and there's a career around that, and that's all good stuff. We started the year off by honoring three of our professors that were both, one of them was full-time, but all three ended their careers here as adjuncts. Harvey Ferraro, who is here tonight. Harvey, there you are. John Shorris, who I don't think I saw him earlier. If you're here, John, just shout out. And Joe Savan. Their work is still on exhibition in the UTLC gallery, including their work on the walls and a video that honors them. And so after the lecture tonight, if you want to go by and see it, please feel free to do that. I wanted to, one of your inserts in your flyer here is about the lecture series this year. We usually have the poster ready for today, but we're trying to firm up one more date. And so the poster ought to go out next week. But just so that you know, next week on September 27th, we are co-sponsoring a lecture with AIA Detroit by Leon Creer, and that's downtown at the DIA. We'd like to call your attention to our student, the 2011 Pellerin Traveling Fellowship presentation, which the Alumni Cabinet actually sponsors that award. And that winning student will be making their presentation on October 6th, and of course everyone is invited. We have on November 3rd Douglas Farr, who wrote a book on sustainable urbanism. He's going to speak here that night, that Thursday night, and then the next morning, the next day, he will be a speaker at a USGBC conference, which will also be here. So if you need your sustainability and health, safety, welfare credits, certainly that would be a good 1-2 punch for you. And then I do want, not to diminish the role of anyone else on this list, they're all great speakers, but I want to call your attention to March 28th. Our speaker will be A. Alfred Taubman, and we will be doing an exhibition about his life and times, and that will also be the night of the AIAS auction. So we would love to see great alumni participation at that. And just a couple of to be determined. We've actually gotten confirmation about Leslie Kino, and I don't know if you know who he is. Many of you may not. If you've ever watched Antiques Roadshow or a new show on television, Hidden Treasures, he and his brother are the stars of that, and he is coming to speak here, through the auspices of Mr. Taubman's invitation, and we're very excited to have someone that's well known in the artifact design world, furniture design and antiques and that sort of thing come here. And then we don't have the date confirmed, but Bob Lutz will also be speaking here this year about his new book on the designers versus the bean counters in the automotive industry. And if you want controversy, come to that lecture, because he will if he isn't walking into controversy that night, he will create it. I guarantee you on that. So a really interesting year ahead, and we hope that you all come to this. And all of our lectures, as you know, are eligible for AIA continuing education credit. And if you need to sign up, there's on the podium outside, there's a sign-up sheet that you can add your name to. So without further ado, I would like to move on with the program and introduce Kim Lipinski to introduce the cabinet members and ultimately the speaker. And Kim is the immediate past chair of the Architecture and Design chapter of the Lawrence Tech Alumni Association. She's currently a senior project manager for Tizio Architects in Livonia, and she's been in that position for 7 years. While a student here at Lawrence Tech, she restarted the AIAS chapter and received the 2003 National AIAS President's Honor Award for her efforts in that regard. While at Lawrence Tech, she was a member of Tau Sigma Delta Architectural Honor Society. She won awards while at Lawrence Tech and participated in the study abroad program in Paris. She taught here for several years as an adjunct professor, and recently you may have seen her exploits chronicled in the Lawrence Tech Alumni magazine, where there was a story that featured her about her appearance on HGTV for her home renovation. So you know, Kim is introducing our speaker, but quite a distinguished alumnus in her own right. Let me introduce you to Kim Lipinski.
Sorry, let me just get situated here. Okay, can everybody hear me? Yeah. Perfect. Thank you for the introduction, Dean Leroy, and welcome everyone. I'm so glad you could all join us tonight for this very special awards presentation. I want to first acknowledge the members of the Architecture Alumni Cabinet who work very hard throughout the year to help advance alumni relations, the College of Architecture and Design, and programs such as the one tonight. The Architecture Alumni Cabinet is a volunteer organization, and the time and talents that these individuals contribute to help advance the university are greatly appreciated. If you are present, please stand to be recognized. Adrian Abrams, who is our chair this year. Kathleen Lilienthal, our chair-elect. Melissa Smecker, our secretary. Keith Logsden. Salvatore Michelli. Michael Schul. Ellen Rotter. And Russell Schoenrath. I would also like to acknowledge our liaison from the University Advancement Office, Mary Randazzo. She's the person that kind of makes all of our ideas come to fruition, and we would be completely lost without you. So, thank you all for your help and service to the university. We as a cabinet have been working hard this past year to implement our new strategic plan, and we've established committees for various goals and tactics that we've deemed most important. We're looking for volunteers to help on these committees, so if anyone's interested in getting involved, please see any of us cabinet members that are present tonight, or contact Mary Randazzo in the University Advancement Office. We have a lot we want to accomplish, and we appreciate any time and talents that you can offer. One of the most important programs that our cabinet has been focusing on is our Traveling Fellowship Award. It was established in honor of Earl Pellerin, who was the founding dean of the College of Architecture and Design. Dr. Pellerin firmly believed that travel was an important part of an architect's education, and so to honor his memory, the Architecture Alumni Cabinet awards a travel study stipend to a meritorious graduate student annually. You'll notice that there's an information sheet in your programs about this fellowship. It is funded solely by donations, and it's the intent that this fellowship becomes an endowed award. If anyone would like to make a donation to the fellowship, you may do so using the enclosed postage-paid envelope in your programs. You are all invited to attend the Pellerin Traveling Fellowship presentation. It's going to take place October 6th at 6 p.m. in T410. And we're going to have postcards that you can grab on the way out. I should note that in the insert in your program with the lecture series, the time's actually listed at 7 p.m. That's incorrect. It is 6 p.m. Last year's winner, Elena Cheladite, will present her travel study presentation, and we will announce the winner for this year. Before I introduce this year's award recipient, I would like to send a special thank you to the past Distinguished Architecture Alumni recipients who comprise the selection committee for this award. And I'd also like to thank JPRA, who took care of the publication designs for this event. Now, I'm delighted to be able to introduce this year's Distinguished Architecture Alumni Award recipient, Paul Urbanek. I had the honor of serving on the Architecture Alumni Cabinet alongside Paul for several years, and his passion and dedication for the architecture profession and this university was apparent in everything that he did. He has over 30 years of architectural design experience and is a true design leader. Paul's currently the Vice President of Design at Smith Group's Detroit office, and he is the lead designer for the FAW Group Corporation's new 4.7 million square foot research and development center located in Changchun, China. Now, some of you may be overwhelmed by the idea of that project scope, 4.7 million square feet. But this project should be a piece of cake for Paul after completing the design of his residence in Royal Oak. As his colleagues expressed to me, building his house took Paul forever. And as any designer who's ever attempted it knows, myself included, this is not uncommon at all. Every detail was meticulously thought out so that it all harmonized and worked towards the big picture result Paul had dreamed of. As anyone who's ever been to Paul's house knows, it's truly an architectural gem. The highlight of it being his enormous porch that wraps around the entire house and provides a gathering space for friends and family. Paul had a big party on his porch when the house was complete, and now everyone's asking, since you finally finished the garage, when can they expect their invitation for the next celebration? Another passion of Paul's is hockey, which I think that all of us here in Hockeytown can appreciate. Paul not only enjoys watching hockey, but he plays the game as well. I remember a few years ago when he had a broken ankle as a result of this. And I should specify it was from playing hockey, not watching hockey. Although I think, let's be honest, we've all wanted to kick the TV when a ref's made a bad call before. When it comes to hockey, Paul has an interesting design philosophy. He believes that any hockey team that doesn't have a good-looking, well-designed uniform cannot win the Stanley Cup. And that in order to break the curse, they must change the design of their uniforms. Now, the Los Angeles Kings, the Vancouver Canucks, the Washington Capitals, Paul might be onto something here. Maybe even the hockey gods are partial to good design. His passion for architecture and design is apparent in all aspects of his life, and on behalf of the Architecture Alumni Cabinet, it's my distinct honor and privilege to present to all of you this year's Distinguished Architecture Alumni Award recipient, design enthusiast, and hockey extraordinaire, Mr. Paul Urbanek.
The award to Paul.
Thank you. Dean Leroy, thank you very much. Whoop.
You are certainly welcome, Paul Urbanek.
Kimberly, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Urbanek.
So, yeah, I'd rather be playing hockey than being here right now. As a matter of fact, that was my other profession. All I knew how to do was draw or play hockey, so you ended up with this one. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the Architectural Alumni Committee. Was part of that for a long time, and I'm carry on. Yeah, hard work that's there, but it's well needed at this university. I'd also like to thank all the previous distinguished architectural alumni that are here. They're also the selection committee, so I have to thank them. It's part of the requirements now. And so I get to vote next year too, right? All right, yeah. Do we get to vote anyone off the island? And thank you, Dean Leroy, and all the others here at the university that really make this place what it is. I also want to thank all the students who have come out. Maybe I'll have something profound to say, maybe not, but we'll figure that one out. I think we all know that architecture is not a singular profession. You don't do it by yourself. You do it with a lot of people. And I've had the opportunity to have quality teachers, employees, colleagues, friends, and clients who all contributed. So what you're going to see here tonight is not just me. It's all those other people that we really work very well together that produce this. And I thank all of you, especially. I know there's a lot in this room. I'm not going to try to name everyone. Maybe it's everyone in this room. Nope, not everyone, because the other ones are family and friends. That's the other half. Nobody's sitting over there. But my family's here, and they take up a big part, so I thank you all for coming. Now you're going to get to see what I've been doing my whole life, or at least the second half of my life. And the two people here that, this is tough, that I know how hard it is for architects' families. But my beautiful wife, Mary, and daughter, Elise, thank you. And thank you for thank you for putting up with all the long hours I spend away from home. Mary's colleagues at UDM think I have another family. Quite honestly, I probably have another 100 families from all the people that I've worked with through the years. But there's a lot of time in architecture, and we all know that, especially all of us architects, how much time it takes to do the work. But this is the rewarding part of it, and I'm very happy to be here. So 29 years, that's what it's taken to get from those seats to this podium. Some people made it faster than me, Art, others slower, Gus, but Anyway, a lot of architecture has changed. I'm not going to read all night. We'll look at some pictures. But a lot of architecture certainly has changed over those years. And the way we practice has truly changed. When I graduated, there were no computers. We all did everything by pencil. Now it's all computers. Someone said they walked through the studio here today, didn't see any onion skin, any bum wad. It's all gone now. It's all just electronic. But all that changed. I wonder how much I've changed. And I think today you'll maybe be able to make some of those decisions for yourselves. The kind of interesting thing is, as I started thinking about this and the whole idea of time, how many clients do we have that, they come to you and they want timeless architecture? I don't know how many times I've heard that in my career. I'm not really interested in timeless architecture. I don't think that's really right. I think architecture should be about its time, and it should be about its place and about the people who create it. When I was in fifth year here, we had to read Complexity and Contradiction, and I read it many, many times. I think it's a great book about architecture and what we really need to do. And I've always thought Venturi forgot one chapter in that book. He wrote 10. Everybody knows that, right? One chapter he forgot was he didn't talk about time, which I think was the fourth dimension of architecture, because there are so many aspects of time. We fail to consider sometimes as architects. We do know that time is sped up for our process. We no longer have the time that we had before to delve into design before we have to make a presentation to a client. We all see that happening faster and faster. Corbu's idea that design is a patient search is no longer really part of the profession. I mean, we are working daily. I have a presentation at Oakland University tomorrow, so sometime between now and then I got to do that presentation. We now begin to judge architecture as a test of time. We give out the 25-year award, which I think is a great award to give, because that's really the design that's been there, and it's really been thought through, and it's really stood that test of time. I'm very concerned with architecture and how we act with architecture and react with architecture, how soon we become bored with some buildings. We walk in, we see it, we're done, we move on. I'm also very concerned with how buildings age. I know when I did the Fetzer Institute, Harry Van Dyne and I, and Harry's a mentor and a friend, talked about that when the building opens, it should be better 10 years later. So think about that when you try to design a building, that you don't want it, you want it to age gracefully. I'm a big fan of Fair Friends, and Fenn talked about allowing a raw material, a dimension of life, as a way to do architecture. And I think that's really the key, really the goal, because I think when you do that, buildings have meaning, and then they become architecture. So hence the name of the thing is that hopefully we'll get some, I can show you what I think about meaning and what that means to me. So we'll go on here, and I have kind of stories and such to tell, so let's see if this all works well. Okay, that worked really well. Let's try this one. A ways back, some of my work was presented in International Architecture Yearbook, and Michael Crosby wrote this about the work. I've not read anything anywhere that anyone said anything more profound about what I've been able to do. I don't know who he's talking about, but he also compared me to Peter Bolin, so I thought that was good too. And I met Peter just this past fall. But it's really an idea of creating buildings that touch people and buildings that people can touch. And you'll start to see some of that. So here's my career. When I was going to school here, I worked at Dorsey & Sirlin Architects. I worked at John Phoenix for a summer down in Houston. When I graduated, I went to Bill Kessler's office. I worked with some people here, obviously. Then I went over to Straub Associates and worked there for a number of years before I moved on to Smith, Hinchman & Grills. Spent a couple years there, and then I was at Harley Ellis, now Harley Ellis Devereaux, and I spent a good portion of 14 years at Harley Ellis. And in the year 2000, I went back to Smith Group, formerly Smith, Hinchman & Grills, and I've been there ever since. So there I am, 1980. I did have hair at one time. The beard I came with, that was, but a little thinner at that point. I don't look like you, Ben, not at all. Sorry. When I was in school in 1982, I graduated. This building was in the cover. This was the talk of the town. Postmodernism was in the rage, and I wasn't all that comfortable with postmodernism. I always thought architecture should be a result of something. Right now I'm reading Charles Mann's book, 1493. Has anyone here read that book? 1493 is a book about what happened after Columbus discovered America. And you took my water. I knew you were going to take my water. I have my own. So Columbus discovered America, right? And everything changed. The North America was separated from Europe. It was the largest Galapagos island in the world. Separated from Europe, separated from Asia. Everything grew up separately here. So when Columbus came over, everything changed. We all know all the things that were brought over here. His friend Cortez brought over smallpox, wiped out a whole civilization. You know, all that stuff was coming over. They brought over, the English brought the earthworm to North America. Believe that. There were no earthworms in North America before the English got here. They brought malaria. There was a lot of mosquitoes, but no malaria. That all came over from the Europeans. But things went back to Europe at the same time. One of the biggest things was tobacco. It was the first world crop. It was sold around the world, all grown in Virginia. And as those crops started, becoming more and more famous and more sought after, the plantation owners of Virginia needed people to run those farms, so they asked their English colleagues to come over as indentured servants. You work for me for a few years, and then I'll give you your freedom, but you got to work on my farm. Problem was, when those English came over, they got malaria. They died. Many of them didn't make it through the first year. So the plantation owners this is about architecture, okay? So the plantation owners had to go search for somebody else to really work. They went to Africa, where malaria existed for many, many years, and the Africans had some immunities to malaria, so they brought them over, and hence, you're not our English comrades. We don't have to ever give you your freedom, and so that's a whole nother story over there. But the problem was, you had malaria here. And they're all growing around the Chesapeake Bay. They're growing up this tobacco. And they're very observant people. That's what we sort of miss a little bit today. But they start to see that people who are near the swamps around Chesapeake Bay are dying of malaria more often than others. So what do? Drain the swamps, right? It's the swamp gas that's killing everybody. So they start to drain the swamps, and they notice that that's helping. But they also notice that the people who are living up in the hills, are getting less malaria, less dying than the people who are living closer to the water in the swamp. So they said, geez, we've got to move up to the hill. So the richer people moving up on the hill. They also start to notice that the people who don't live in the forest are surviving better. Their families are surviving better. So they're starting to say, well, hey, let's cut down the trees at the top of our hill. And they also notice that where they have good breezes, lots of breezes through, good ventilation, they're not getting malaria. So they start creating large windows. They steal a couple of details from antiquity and such, and lo and behold, we have Mount Vernon, we have Monticello, all of those things. So I would contend that part of our beloved colonial architecture is not necessarily a style, but a result of trying to make a place better to live. And so when you start looking, that's what I think about when I do design. It's not so much where you go in with a preconceived idea, but you look at all the issues that are affecting architecture and do a result. So I always had trouble when they started with the result and worked backwards. But now it's on the historic preservation list, so Mr. Graves is there. But this was in 1982, so I came out in 1984, and with the blessing of Stu Pettit and Frank Straub and Tom Yates, they let me do a building, and I did this. It's a little warehouse. There's no stealing from someplace else. Well, maybe I stole from modernist ideas. But it's a warehouse, and it sort of starts to deal with the issue of the big box, little box. It's a very simple little building. Stu wouldn't let me do, start small, little at a time. But it dealt with solid and void. It dealt with color. But one of the great things that we did back then was we were very rigorous in trying to explain what we did. And Stu was pretty forceful in making us do the work and put the stuff together. And we did the drawings. These are all done by hand, so all that's all. I drew every one of those lines. So that's the building. It's a white box with green voids. I think if someone gave me that program today, I might not do too different of a job. But that was the first one. That's where everything started back in 1984. This past year, I had the wonderful opportunity to work with a group at Smith Group on a project in China, as Kimberly said. It's for First Automotive Works. It's about almost 5 million square feet. It's a research and development center, very much like the Chrysler Tech Center or the GM Tech Center. Just so that you all know, Changchun, China is up there. Here's Beijing right in here, and Shanghai's right down here. So Russ doesn't get one down here. He tells us we have to go up here. We get off a plane in March, and there's 3 foot of snow on the ground. It's about 10 degrees. It's cold. Ironically, it's at the same latitude almost as Detroit, but it is tremendously colder, tremendously colder. And I say that because it has a lot to do with the design. Here's Changchun. We all know the city of Changchun, China. It's a small city of about 7 million people. So it would be about the second or third largest city in the United States. Here's our site right down over here, that little lake piece there. But and this, I don't know, it's like the 10th largest city in China. I never heard of it till we got there. It is the automotive capital of China, though. It's like its sister city should be Detroit because it's automotive. So give you an idea of comparables that we did for them. Here's FAW, GM Tech Center, Ford, Chrysler Tech Center. The building is about 5 million square feet, so is this one. I'm not quite sure exactly what the total square footage of the other two are, but you can see the site that we had is about half the size of these, or a quarter or a third, so we had a pretty dense site to put this together. So I said we were up in Changchun, China, and we experienced it, and it was very, very cold when we got there. So we were in a competition with some Europeans that did the Renault plant and the Renault factories, and so we decided on a single building concept, much like the Chrysler Tech Center. The idea was that you could get from the engineering offices here to the plants there in a conditioned space. I mean, who wants to go outside in January? None of us do. Certainly nobody over there does either. So the big picture was a single building concept. Now, we did some research with the Chinese. In southern China and Shanghai, you can do anything. They don't, You know, any kind of design, any twisty building you want to do, they can do. In northern China, they're still very traditional. They still believe very much in the Chinese way of building things. So they're very, very keen on symmetry. That's, you put the door in the center. Why would you put it anywhere else? That's absolute. There's no movement. If we move anything, they kind of look at us funny. There's also this notion of feng shui, which comes into play a lot. We had 2 feng shui masters review our plans at 2 different times during the process. But you want to have water on the east, and you want to have water on the south. That's good. Water on the north is bad. You want to enter your building either from the south or from the east, which we did. Entering from the west is not good because that's how you enter a cemetery, so that's not good. And the north is not really that, you're supposed to have mountains in the north, but we had no mountains. But we did put all the laboratory work on the north side of the building, which worked very well for them. Also, odd numbers of floors is very good, so 7 stories high, 5 stories high, 3 stories high. I mean, that's all good. So you learn that, and you start doing it and talking to them about it, and your architecture starts to make some sense. It has meaning for the people in China. So here's what it looks like, our latest planning. That red square that you see there is a half-mile square. So you can see how large this really is. The test track is a half-mile from here to here. So you're going to enter here at the east side, kind of a ceremonial entry. You look across the lake. That's the project team building. Then you come around here and enter from the south, and that's the administration building. This is a large sloping green roof over the top of it that houses all the engineering offices. We have 7 floors of parking deck over here. They don't usually build parking decks vertically in China. Most of them are either underground or non-existent. And then we have all of our laboratories back here, evaluation center. And then the last building, the only freestanding building, is a training center that's over on the east side of the site. So here's a view of the project team building from across the lake. As you can count the stories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good deal, they like that. Here's the planning. So you can see administration, all the blue. Here, this is the first floor. All the blue are engineering offices, as well as the dark blue. These are the laboratories in green, and then the support in gray. But you can sort of get a feel for this. This atrium space in the middle is 60 meters wide and over 300 meters long. So all of you who worked on FAW, get used to the meters. All the rest of you have to do the calculations. The next floor up shows many of the engineering items. This lake that's over here, by the way, is 1 floor above the first floor. So we enter from the lake level here. So this is an existing dam on the site. We just kind of fixed it up a little bit. Then you go up the 3rd level, and then all the way up to the top. The administration building needs to be the tallest building on the site. Also, that's very important to them. So here's the administration building and the main kind of front door. One thing we did here to really sort of, you saw the square was kind of a little bit cocked. That square went directly north-south. So we aligned all these vertical sunscreens here on the curtain wall directly to the cardinal coordinates so that the building is locked in its place on the earth. So as the sun passes through day after day, the Chinese are very big about the zodiac and the sun. They can tell exactly where they're at. A couple of views of the atrium. Working with some excellent structural engineers at Smith Group, we designed sort of a birdcage structural system. Mr. Zhu. Mr. Zhu is our leader from China. He's also very big in feng shui. But he's also very respectful, so he'll never tell us when he doesn't like anything. But I think we all sort of learned over time that when he said it was bad feng shui, that kind of meant he didn't like it, because we could never argue with him. So you'd get these little things. He didn't like these columns. He didn't want any columns in here. You know, I said, it's 60 meters wide. It's 300, you know, how are you not going to have columns in there? So we tried to make them as small as we could. And then just to kind of play, the columns don't touch the ceiling. They're on the cage there. So they kind of look like they don't need to be there in the first place, but they certainly do. Between the administration building and the engineering center is the exhibition hall, which is a series of interlocking structural members. Mr. Zhu called it his own bird cage. So this would be a place where everybody who would go from administration or any guest would come in before they got to engineering, would pass through this, and they could show off their automobiles. And lastly, this is the training center, which was the last building we just turned over. It's the only one that's not symmetrical. We finally got an asymmetrical building on site here. I think the important thing here to note is that there was a small group of us. I know Ben's here, but I think there's about 5 of us working on the competition. We started the competition in April of 2010. Russ Sykes is here. We went and presented this in China in May of 2010. We won the competition. We had to turn over our design development documents for 5 million square feet by Thanksgiving. So there was a huge part. Smith Group used 6 offices and a lot of people to put the project together. It's kind of, I talked a little bit about time. There isn't time to really sit back and really think about design. You're designing as you're going as fast as you possibly can. So between those 2 buildings was a whole host of things that happened. And I'm just going to touch on 3 different places. I'm going to start with when I was at Straub Associates, because that's where I started learning. It was the first opportunity I had to start designing buildings. And these are how we used to present the buildings, by drawing by hand, as Harvey taught us to do. This is a small building in Royal Oak. The other building in Royal Oak. It's over there on Woodward Avenue. You won't recognize it anymore because when the DMC built it, or bought it, they covered it with thin brick. So I'm real happy about that. But it's still up. I think you can start to see sort of an idea of a formality, an idea of starting to look at materiality and detail and understanding how things are going together. Another project was TRW. This was one of my first forays into automotive work. This is out by Stony Creek Metro Park. But again, starting to look at materiality. I got kind of teed off a little bit because I worked so hard to get this glazed brick, and then Bill Kessler used it on the project in Ann Arbor before we got the building built. And so, oh well. So those are a couple of early shots of things. And then I moved over to Harley Ellis, and now Harley Ellis Devereaux, and I thought this was kind of where I think, matured as a designer, working with Sam and Gary Skog, Sam Bain, Gary Skog, Harry Van Dyne. I had Harry Van Dyne as a professor here at LTU a couple of times, and when I graduated, I interviewed with Harry, and he didn't hire me. And a few years later, I interviewed with Harry again, and he didn't hire me. I went over to Harley to interview with Harry, and he didn't hire me, but he told me to talk to Gary Skog and Sam Bain, and they hired me. So, I worked there, and I thought of Harry as a real mentor, and now I still keep in touch with him as a friend and colleague. So, this is Holy Cross Mausoleum at Harley. If you don't know, I used to do a lot of mausoleums, and I just have a couple of projects from Harley here. The interesting thing, I think, about this mausoleum is it starts to talk a little bit about some of the thoughts I had about the weight of architecture and the grounding of it, but also the materiality, and also because I like drawing, so this was one of the better drawings. And you'll see the drawings, like this little sketchy stuff here, that's all I do today, so used to draw more. So here it is. It's an addition to this chapel mausoleum that's here, so we built this. Well, we were going to build the whole U-shaped piece, but this piece didn't get built. So we built the chapel, and we built this kind of little piece over here. And as we used to draw it all by hand, right? And as things change today, we just go into Photoshop, and there's about a dozen people in our office that can do this way better than I. But before, you just have to tape new things over the sepia paper and send it out. So I was going to cover that up in Photoshop, but I didn't. So I can do that, guys. You taught me well. But I didn't do it. But yeah, I drew every one of these little crypts, all the way around. I don't know, it's 5,000 or something like that. So, but it's a very formalized plan, very symmetrical. The stairs are kind of playing against each other. Those of you who know me know I'm a real fan of Luke Kahn, and so those kinds of things come to play. The idea of movement, of transition, of going from outside through a portal into a light space and then back and forth again, always trying to understand how people are going to act with the architecture. And then really trying to find a point of making the chapel, which is the ceremonial piece. This is the only church I've ever done, Gus. So it's right here. So you can crit me on this one. So this is what it looks like. It's all cast-in-place concrete. It's the only cast-in-place concrete project I've ever done. Well, no, I take that back. The only all cast-in-place concrete job I've ever done out in California. This slide might be a little bit difficult, but one of the ideas that I really tried to do here is understand what the crypt and the mausoleum was all about and try to respond to that architecturally. So the notion of preciousness comes to mind. So the building is cast-in-place concrete. That's what this is. And then everything as you move toward the crypt or toward the face of the crypt gets more and more precious. So now these boxes here that house crypts are done in limestone. And as you move into the face of the crypt, they're done in granite. And if you go inside, they're done in marble. And they keep getting richer and richer and richer as an expression of the idea that that's the sacred place. And so it's really a study of how architectural and materiality really could start to tell a story. Also the idea of creating these solid objects and then trying to find void behind them, being able to see through them. So here was my attempt at trying to describe that. And then this is the chapel. A little bit unfortunate is the client, this is supposed to be a lighter stone, but the client wanted a dark Rosa Levanto stone, and so all the altar pieces kind of don't show up too well here. But we designed all the altar pieces, the altar, the ambo, the chair, the baptismal fonts and such. And just kind of, all the people, mausoleums are really just another business in reality. I mean, we try to make them more than that, but down in the floor here, there are 2 crypts, and the guys thought, well, yeah, we weren't going to make a fortune on these. We got 2 crypts right here in front of the altar and everything. This is wonderful. This is going to be great. The Archbishop took them. Sorry, you don't get any money for those, so oh well. But at least we knew the Archbishop thought they were good. So I think the Fetzer project, what you're going to see here, was a pivotal point for me. It was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. The Fetzer organization was great. I still have great contact with the Fetzer organization. The Fetzer is a study of mind, body, spirit, health. And their whole idea is really to understand how the spiritual of people connects to their health. I kind of put it, John Fetzer, if you sort of asked him, or he went around and he didn't do this, but it's sort of, if you go to every oncology ward anywhere in the world and you ask the doctors and the nurses, if people who want to live, do they live longer than the people who give up? And the answer is almost always yes. And so they wanted to find out why. And so that's what they set up an institute for, and this was a retreat center for them to bring like minds from all over the world to come together and talk about it. So it's in the woods of western Michigan. Parker Palmer was one of their fellows there, and he's a teacher and philosopher. He's also a Quaker. That's not to hold that against him. But Parker's a great guy, and he made a comment. He said that a retreat center is the perfect harmony of community and solitude, and that resonated very much with us. And so the idea is to create those two architectures. So the first building you see here is the community center, and then these little pods out here are the retreat units, basically the living units. So these become solitude, this becomes community. There was this kind of peninsula that kind of ran out here to this point, so we sort of formally organized those units looking all out to the same point, even though you can't see one unit from the other because the forest is so dense, but they all kind of peer to the same point, which is kind of a sacred place in the landscape. You can see that the community building is pushed up against the pathway so that you have to interact with it. That's the idea of community, is to get interaction. Whereas these buildings are all set up sort of like islands. You get to them by crossing a bridge. And we're all kind of tight to what was their original administration building, or is their original administration building that Harley also did before I got there. So here's a picture of the community building. I said we built this in the forest. And we built it in the forest on a 30-degree slope, and we built it with a tower crane, which was fantastic because you could get these trees to remain here by building it that way. These wouldn't be here if we had to clear the forest and bring dump trucks and cement mixers down here and make this happen. Everything came from overhead, so it was really quite spectacular to have that happen. The idea of the materiality was to really try to get something that was very tactile, that people could touch and understand, the coarseness of the stone and the copper roofs that would change over time. So I said at the very beginning, Harry and I talked about trying to make this building look better 10 years after it opens. I think it certainly does. I was there at that point, and it looks that way. This is the main meeting house. One thing that you learn from Fetzer is they talk about all kinds of things, and they do all sorts of great things here. Hillary Clinton was here, and the Dalai Lama was here, so they get pretty spectacular people here. I drew this elevation of this fireplace in the working drawings of the building. I don't know, whenever that was, I can't remember the exact date. But then when we started construction a few years later, we flew to Fond du Lac, Wisconsin to look at the stone. And as we were walking into the stone quarry, Dave Miller, the client from Fetzer, finds this stone, and it looks almost exactly like the rendering that I had done a couple of years prior. And one thing that Fetzer always says is there's no such thing as coincidence. And the longer you hang out with those guys, the more you go, geez, you might have something here. So, but it's really pretty spectacular to see that. So here's some other shots. And now you start to see the residential units. They're all these kind of pods that spiral out across here, and the bridge that you go to get to them, and they're all kind of buried in the woods. You couldn't do this if you didn't have the tower crane. There wouldn't be these trees here. Look at that. It's right against the building. So there's the units. The units stack 3 high, and they're in pairs. There's 3 here and 3 here. Gary Casada took all these shots, so when he was a photographer. Another project that we did was the music school at Central Michigan, and Gary found this shot too. It's made a cover of a magazine, so it's pretty cool. The music school really, for me, again, started my kind of investigation of material and quality of light. They wanted a light and airy building that had to be very, very solid, so there's kind of a plan of the first level. You can start to see I still doodle. The notion of it was to create a performance space that put everybody on performance, so everything, all the walls, all the way around are all thought of as these thin planes, so they're sort of like all stage fronts. So when you walk through the door, you can see there's another plane. You're just walking in to be part of the performance. And the idea of trying to understand the materiality, this is all maple wood, concrete block, and lots of gypboard, carpet and such. But natural light, these are very tall windows to let natural light into the performance space. You can see we developed stages on the side so that people sitting here are also in the performance. And lastly, everything is detailed. I had seen some MR16 lamps that when you cut the power, they sort of glow blue like the old gas stoves and such. You get that little blue flame that flickers. So we designed these lamps so that they stick up here, so when you dim them down, they glow blue and they look like flames flickering. So when all the house lights come down, these are the last things that are lit. So I could tell a story about this. So when I'm at Harley and we do the mock-up of the lamp, this is metal and these are all. It comes in and we're testing it, looking at it. It all looks pretty cool. And I put it back in the box, go home. Come back the next day, the box is gone. So I go to Bob and Bob, what happened to the box? I don't know, Paul. They must have thought it was trash. I said, trash? That was our light. We got to send it back. It was a mock-up. So he goes and dumpster dives. It went through the dumpster, it went through the compactor, so this thing got crushed. So I called the guy on the phone to say, well, your lamp got a little bit, it got a little messed up over here. We were kind of testing it. He goes, don't worry, just send it back, it'll be fine. Okay. Boy, did I hear it when he got that lamp. Anyway, he built them. So there's and I don't know, Gary, how you did this, but you always got the woman in the red dress. No other photographer gets that, but you certainly did almost in every shot. So, like I said, I went to Smith Group in 2000 and Carl asked me to kind of come over and lead design at Smith Group, so I did, and I've been doing that ever since, I think. Sometimes I question whether I'm leading or just trying to get through the next day, but that's for another story. But we did the Detroit Zoo Educational Center. One of the first projects we did, it's a series of kind of classrooms in the sky. One of the big things I thought of is the kids coming to the zoo don't want to go to a typical classroom, so we don't want to go in the building and find our door on a corridor, so we made access to every classroom from the outside, so all the kids can go to their own classroom if they want, and it's kind of a different experience. You don't just walk in on grades, you got to go up the stair. These were supposed to be wood columns, so that's why they're so close to the windows, so that you could look out and see the wood, but the zoo wouldn't let us use wood columns. At the very end, at the construction, we're out, you can't have wood columns. Why? Everything else is wood. Anyway, so we had to do concrete columns. So I always get comments from people, how come you have a concrete column in front of the window? Okay, well, that's it. So that's the shape. There's an auditorium, a little gallery space. We had to find a place to put their simulator ride, and then all the kind of classrooms and such are over here. It serves a number of functions for the zoo. We tried to create a courtyard such that they could use that for outside kind of efforts. The gallery space. I'm always interested in standing in one part of a building, seeing the other part. I think that's sort of interesting that you could see the inside and the outside at the same time, and it adds to the architecture. On a materiality basis, these are concrete floors, concrete columns. These are just standard Pella windows. The bridge that goes across, you been there? Of course you have, right? Of course you have. I wanted this bridge to be like a rope bridge, like you saw in Tarzan movies. Nobody would let me do that, though. So it just seemed the right thing, you're going from over here to over here, swaying on a bridge. That'd be cool. We did a project up at Michigan Tech. Everybody knows where that's at. The environment there is very harsh, very cold. Bill Blumhart, who's passed away now, was very adamant that this building had to be solid, had to be able to stay warm. There's a limitation on how much glass you could have and such. He said that the building will be brick and it won't have any overhangs. Sorry, Bill, it's not brick, and it does have an overhang. One of the cool things, though, this is kind of funny. We built this bridge that connects two parts of the building together. It's 110 feet long. And we didn't have a lot of money for it, so there's no air conditioning to the bridge and no heating. And it sort of slopes. It doesn't slope that much. It slopes a little bit. This was just exaggerating that because it's a bridge, right? So you got to do a little slope. Well, in the winter, we have the snow would blow right through these louvers. It's so fine. So fine, it's the lightest powder. It'd blow right through the louvers and land on the bridge. And the bridge has a little bit of a slope to it. And in the sun would come out and melt the snow just enough to create this sheet of ice. It was unbelievable. You could not even tell it was ice until you stepped on it, man, and you were down. And I'm a hockey player. I was down. But Bill, as he was always a gracious person. He said, Paul, I told you to do it that way. It's my fault. Let's figure out a way to fix it. So, because he didn't want to heat it. I said, Bill, if we would have heated it, we wouldn't have this problem. But so we fixed it. We had to get some really, really good filters for that. The cool thing that we tried to do, I said we kind of be very careful with our glass. We built this large picture window into the library that's a 24-hour reading room. And I'm taking this picture, I'm not taking it, Justin's taking it, but this picture is taken from the freeway. So every time you drive to Michigan Tech, you can go by this building, and every time I'm there, I look to see if there's people in here. And all times of the day, I always see a few people in there. The library had almost nobody going to it. We had folks in our office from Michigan Tech who had never been inside the library. And Weingarts, I know you haven't been inside the library, or any library. But unless the library downtown Houghton, because I know that's where the beer is. But Jim Haken, our client up there, he said he really likes this because it makes people understand that there are intelligent people up here. And so that's a nice comment from an owner. But the idea was to get people to be seen. You go to college campuses so much, you don't see anybody. They're in these big buildings and you can't see them. So the idea here was really to have them seen from the community. Another project that really was pretty special to me was this one at Indian Springs Metro Park, which was an environmental education building, environmental discovery center they call it, which is the idea was to sort of take the notion of the rolling hills of the park, which they're restoring to a prairie, and kind of tuck the building very quietly into that prairie. So you see these, you see it's all copper. Oh, there we go. It's all copper on this side, and then there's one opening, and that's the door to get in. So there's no other windows. As a matter of fact, there's no penetrations through that copper roof anywhere. I worked with Dave Kistler on that, a mechanical engineer, and you know how hard it is for mechanical engineers not to put something through the roof. But there is not one piece through the roof or the copper walls, so that kudos to Dave. And so here's an early sketch. You can see now my sketches are just scribbles, and they're done pretty quickly, and then I rely on all the other people who are really, really good at all the other sketching to help me out. And this is what it looks like from the other side. So the one side is very solid, the other side is very transparent. It opens onto these restored wetlands. This is the muck pond, so the kids can come out, go over here and grab some muck, take it back into the science labs and look at it through the microscopes and see what's going on. A couple of cool things happen with this building. One is that the homeschoolers think it's great because now they have science labs they can use. Typically, they would have to wait and rent the space from schools, and they'd have to do it at night. Well, here they can rent it during the day, and the kids get to study science during the day. So it's really big for homeschoolers. And secondly, this place is booked 2 years in advance every weekend from April to October for weddings. So if you want to get married here, you got 2 years to wait. It's beautiful. We were there. My wife and daughter and I were there, and there was a wedding, and they were over by the big oak tree getting married, and then they had a procession with balloons and stuff, walking back to the building, and they hold their up here. It's a big hall up here. Our client here is a great guy, Mike Ahrens, the senior engineer for the Metro Parks, and very insightful. He knew that the only way they were going to ever be able to pay for the educational aspects of this building was to build a multi-purpose space that he could rent out. He never expected it to be such a boom for him, but it's rented out all the time. In here, right under here, is our underwater classroom, which was kind of the additional piece that we did. We have this science classroom within. This is where they can all go and bring their muck and look at it under the microscopes. And then underwater, you can go down under here and look at the pond. Now, I was always told, we did all these comments, it's a pond, it's a swamp, basically. What are we going to see? I'd always ask them, but they all said it was going to be clear. It's not really clear, but it's getting clearer. The one gentleman from the Metro Park that wanted this project was a scuba diver. And his scuba diving group would have all these weddings and such underwater, but the bride could never wear a bride's gown. So he wanted a spot where they could get married underwater and the bride could wear a gown. So You know, I don't know. We were doing an environmental education building, and we're, now we're just building a wedding chapel. What do you think, Gus? Nice chapel, eh? So there it is. And we lit it with this great neon lighting. Our lighting group did that, so it looks like a spaceship landed there. So. Another project, this is over at University of Michigan, LS&A building. Now I'm neglecting to put the original building, but we renovated this building for the school, cleaned it up, added some pieces to the outside to fix it up. But the thing that we really tried to do here was really look at the material quality. So you see that, we added ground face block, we added lots of wood. The furniture has a real sort of gesture to it. This project, the Laurie Nanofabrication Laboratory, and I love this building. I had the pleasure of working with two extremely talented, one of those is Tom O'Connor, who's here tonight, who detailed that curtain wall, which we'll talk about in a minute, and the other is Z.Y. Liu, structural extraordinaire. He's fantastic. This is a 20-foot cantilever supporting all that brick. I don't know that anyone but ZY could figure out how to do that. This is a glass curtain wall that is completely transparent. I don't know that anyone could do that but Tom. So I don't know that there's too many people in the country that could build a building like this. It is a clean room, so the idea was to open the wall, which is brick, which the University of Michigan wants brick, and expose the clean room. So there's the clean room. Most clean rooms are buried deep inside of buildings. This one is all out there for you to see. So as you walk, you don't even have to go in the building. You walk past the building, you can see into the clean room. The people in here in their bunny suits can see back outside. It does everything that they wanted it to do and more. Here it is on North Campus. It's a 40,000 square foot building on the end of the behemoth Eakes building that Smith Group also did. It's also a gateway to North Campus, so a lot of students parking over here come through and go through the Eakes building into the North Campus quad. So it becomes a front door also for the North Campus. This is what they do. They do all sorts of nanofabrication, so inside of there is this, which is a switch. It's basically, this is plate technology. They do biomedical technology now, and they're well beyond anything I could ever explain to anyone. But it's very much at the nanoparticle level. So what we did to sort of express what they did, because nobody can see that, is to take that and blow it up 1 million times and create an image on the facade as a billboard to the engineering campus. Because after all, this is engineering, and if you look at any of the other buildings here, I dare you all to tell me it's an engineering campus. That's very hard to tell that. So we wanted to make sure that we knew it was engineering. And as I said, I'm not looking for a timeless building. If this building changes uses in 20 or 30 years, so what? We know what it started as, we know where its history came from, and that's the cool part. Here's our incised tour aisle right here. And so you can see it. They wanted a tour aisle because they wanted to bring guests and such to show them the clean room, and they didn't want to have to dress them in the bunny suits. So here's the tour aisle, and here's the clean room. I told you it's a 40,000 square foot building and a 6,000 square foot clean room. I've always been one to say that we don't build buildings to wrap around our mechanical systems, but here we did exactly that. So our mechanical guys were very happy. But here's the tour aisle. As I said, working with Tom, drawing full scale and sometimes 2 times full scale details of this curtain wall, which is just glass, 10 foot high, it's 150 feet long, spanning from top to bottom, so that it's completely transparent as a membrane is what it's supposed to be, so you can see into these clean room areas. Here it's going in. You can see the cantilever. Pretty nice. These are the beams with their moment connections. Not only do we have to cantilever this whole thing, we got to snake it in between all this existing building and such. So it was really cool. And this is the result. Pretty clean space. We take our interns here periodically in the summer, and I always ask them when they get into the space, what's missing? none of them really look, and I understand it. And I said, well, there's no columns, and there's no metal holding, it's because I think it's right. It feels right, and nobody understands. There's nothing missing. It's what it should be, and it works very, very nicely. We're getting to the end. 2010, University of Louisville biomedical facility. I do a lot of lab buildings. This is an urban site in Louisville. We did a 280,000 square foot biomedical laboratory building. The kind of notion here was to really set a front door for the University of Louisville's new, they own all this property now. This will be their East Research Quad. Smith Group has been on the Louisville campus since Sig Blum. So we got one here. Well, let's see. That's the dental school. There's the medical school, the library, the research tower. Those are all Sig Blum buildings. In the 70s, we did the parking and service building. We did the outpatient building here. We did the university hospital here. In the 90s, we did these two research towers, and then we did this one. So we've done a lot of projects here. So there's kind of a long history. But I'm new to the block, new kid on the block, so they got to figure out what I know. We originally started, this is kind of just a little history. This was our site when we started. We were here, we were funded, we started schematic design, got to here, and then our funding got cut in half. They said, oh, just make the building half as big and keep going, no end date change. We get through design development, oh, by the way, we're going to move you over to this site. Just keep going, just turn the building around. We got it all designed for sun angles and everything. Just put it over here, it'll work fine. We get this building, we're about halfway through CDs, and they go, oh, we got the rest of our funding, now the building can be twice as big. And since we don't want to change the end date, just mirror it. So it got to be symmetrical. Hey, I'm just an architect, man. I don't run the show here. So you're stuck. I mean, I don't know. Does Frank Gehry get these problems? No, probably not. So we started playing around with what this meant, and we started looking at how these buildings are starting to angle and how we could kind of do some things to make that work. And I think we did some pretty cool things. So you can see how dense packed these are, these laboratory buildings. There's no space for anything. So we created these outdoor porches. So when you go 6 stories up and the researcher's in the lab all day, he can come out and get some air without having to go all the way down to the lower level. On the first floor, we made a very open space for a lot of seminars and such. The Louisville AIA holds their meetings here, so it can't be that bad of a space, I guess. So here's the story. Every project has a story. I already told you the story on this one. But I told you I'm the new kid on the block, so they have to figure out if I can draw, right? So we did about 30 schemes for this building, and then we were down there presenting them, and they kind of settled on like 3 of them, and they said, but we want you to do some 3-dimensional sketches for these, show us what it might look like in a sketch form. So I had one of the people back in the office fax over just some rough 3-dimensional models that I could sketch over to try to get this done. So I go to the hotel that night, and I get my faxes. They're almost perfectly black. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to, I could just barely make out some blocks of buildings and such. So I'm thinking, okay, if I had a light table, I could probably do this. This is when you draw by hand, you can figure this out, right? I had a light table, I could probably do this. So I'm thinking, oh, how am I going to do this? The television. I turned on the television, turned to a non-existing channel so I could get the fog stuff, taped the paper on the thing, and I sketched these 2 sketches. So I went into the meeting the next day well, I took these 2 sketches. They were on 8.5 by 11. I go to our associate architect's office. I get their best CAD guy, I said, scan these in, blow them up to 11 by 17. We're going with these. We're going to print them and take them out. So you got to change the scale when you do the scanning thing. I learned that. That's the real trick. But anyway, so we were good. I was good. They figured out I could draw, and I was not just a damn Yankee anymore. I could draw. So here's what it looks like. I said it was a symmetrical building, but we did this kind of little piece here in the corner of the crotch to aim it towards the hospital where all these people would go. We created this little pocket park, and then we put the entrance here. so it isn't symmetrical. We started to doing some sun shading devices because these guys face southwest, these guys face northwest. So we turned our building all around on us, and we had to kind of figure out how to do that. We opened up the first floor so that you could see in from the street. It's, I said, a very urban space, and we wanted to get into to be able to see in. So we have our lobby. This backlit glass wall here has a frit on it that's a DNA pattern. They do cancer research here. We don't know what DNA pattern we have on there, so hopefully it's a good one. And then we got the conference rooms and the training rooms are in there. Lori James, I work with, interior designer, likes to use kind of these bright colors, but Stephen Cotton picked that red. And a little bit off from the rest of the palette, but it's still pretty cool. Those are the labs. We all see what labs look like. This is what it looks like during the day. So we have a lot of fritted glass on here, sunshades and such. These are the main stairs going up. Here are the porches for the researchers. People tell us it looks like a hotel. Did this, I don't have any details of it, but a kind of an interesting thing with the brick to kind of let that plane of brick come down to the ground and rest, and started my kind of preoccupation with trying to see what you could do with brick. We're kind of taking that to like on the F-rib, the next level. So we'll see where that goes. After that, we did a little project here at Madonna University. It's always good when you get a lake in front of your building, right? Get these kind of great reflections. Wish we had that on our house, right? So there's the lake. Here's our building. This building became a study of how people use it with academic space and social space. It is the social heart of Madonna University. The space right here is kind of where all the students were expected to gather. So here's our academic space. That's a cat. Lots of laboratories. So here's what it looks like coming in from the side. It looks like a nice academic building. All the space is kind of lit up. And then when you get inside, here's the social space. They call it the St. Francis Court. It's where the students hang out. And so the idea here was very much trying to look at materiality and how one would be in a building that's for academic study and then move into a part of that building that is for social and community gathering. We built this nice porch here so that they could sit here and look out at the lake. So this project is just about finished. I was fortunate, graduated from Lawrence Tech 29 years ago. If somebody would have told me I would be working in China or working at Cranbrook, I would have laughed at them. But I've had the tremendous opportunity to work in both places. This place at Cranbrook, as we all know, Cranbrook is incredibly special. This is the collection building to the museum. Worked on this with Kevin Schultes. You'll see some of Kevin's work because he did a lot of the conceptual work for this piece, which is the loading dock, which really now becomes kind of a real figure of the building itself as one enters the site. But we're just, this is the stair of the Chinese dog. I'll get to the plan in a second. But this is a collection building. It has, nobody really goes in there except museum staff. There is one classroom right there that they can bring you in if you're invited in to look at the artwork within the collection, which is very special. They have now a teaching collection at Cranbrook, which is one of the few in the country. This is my, I showed you the SSEL building. We had that glass tour aisle, so we had one window. Here again, one window. You'll see again. I do a lot of buildings that have one window. So you have to do something special with the window. Maneo's building is over here, if you're familiar with Cranbrook. So here's our building. Maneo's studio building is right here. We were asked and directed to follow the Maneo master plan. So here's Raphael's master plan. He did an addition to the museum here, a new entrance to the museum, the studio building here, and then this collections building here. He connected the collection building to the museum under the stair of the Chinese dog. That space to get under the stair is probably about 7 foot high by about 3 foot wide. We're going to get all the artwork, all the mechanical, all the people. It wasn't going to work, so we had to do a few other things. So there's a tunnel over here now. It all works pretty nicely. So the form of the building was, pretty much what Mineo was looking for, and that's what Cranbrook directed us to do. Noting all that, we took an opportunity to look at other parts of the building and did a master plan for the future development of this, because Mineo never changed this from a parking lot, but eventually this is going to be the front door to the museum right here. They also want to build an archives building, which we showed them how to do that, and then down at this end, a parking deck. So there's lots of plans, and Cranbrook's just got to continue to raise money to do so. But now you can see the scribbles get scribblier, but they kind of get the point across of what that could be. This is the archives building. Here's the collections building on the side as you enter. So archives is here, Mineo's building is over here, and our collection building is right here. From the stair of the Chinese dog, this is the pathway that leads to Cranbrook House. This is the loading dock, and I said Kevin worked on this, and I give him a lot of credit for really pushing the envelope here on what we needed to do to make this work. I'm going to take the credit for the material. Mineo's building has lead-coated copper. We wanted to get something that would be reminiscent of that, but not use the same material. So this is hot dip galvanized. The panels for this, and the design of the panels kind of shows that they're plates that are hot dipped. So you get this great patterning that's on them. When this was first put up, I was out on the site looking at it, and I love it, admiring kind of all the nuances that happen in the hot dip galvanizing. And one of the workmen comes by and kind of looks at it and goes, "Incredible, only at Cranbrook." And I said, well, that's kind of the point, isn't it? And so I was very happy to hear that. So this brick is exactly the same brick that Mineo used on the studio building. The dark brick that you saw next to the window there is, again, the same brick, but we double fired it and clear glazed it. And I know it was the right brick to use, because when I went out there with Mary to look at it and look at the mock-up, and I was so excited about it, she goes, "You're going to use that old brick on the building?" I knew that was the right brick to use. So here's some shots. On the inside, the collections building is really a warehouse. It's really just to store the artwork. So what we did was we took concrete block, just standard concrete block, and tried to elevate it to an art form, much like many artists do. So everywhere there's a penetration, we made it precious. So we made these niches for art. This is stainless steel and granite. You'll see some other pieces, stainless steel handrails. So we're taking what is kind of a standard material that everybody uses and trying to make it something richer. Most masons wash this coating off of the block when they clean it after mortaring it together. We didn't want them to do that. We liked the coating so much, so we had them dry clean the block. So what, it's a little harder, but it worked. It looks really cool. So here's the corridor. It's 10 by 10 by 10. So all the artwork can move within our collections building. It's 10 by 10 by 10. The DIA is 9 by 9 by 9. So we're 1 foot larger than the DIA here, because they have big pieces. The Dulles model, we had to move through this corridor. It's 14 feet long. And they have a painting, and I don't remember who the painting is by, that's 20 foot long. So we had to get both of those through the corridor out of the collection to here. When I see this picture, I said, if the film industry finds out they have this kind of tunnel here, it'll be an alien prison. And I mentioned that to Reed Kroloff. He says, an alien prison with aliens that really like art. So here's our brick. That's the glazed brick and the double fired, and it sits next to the Cranbrook buckskin. I think it really has a tremendous complement. The wall that faces the Orpheus Fountain is a blank wall. There's not anything on it except for this bench. This bench is sort of homage to the bench that's at the nanatorium that Todd Williams did, which is at the other end of the Grand Ole. So they're kind of sisters to each other now to kind of bookend the Grand Ole. Lastly, this is the end. We're getting close. On the board. So here, this project we just finished. It's going to be photographed next week, which is the event center at Central Michigan University. The idea here was to really make a transparent lobby and concourses so that we could really push the energy, as we said, from the street to the seat. So we redid the whole interior pieces here, put in a club room that's suspended out in the space. When this was built, they called it a gymnasium, which is what it was. Now it's an arena. So hopefully they'll have a basketball team that can take advantage of that. A project at the University of, oh boy, I'm going to get slapped here. At Michigan State University, sorry Elise. Michigan State University, Plant Sciences. This building is under construction. This should be finished in November. It's another laboratory building, so you can see it's pretty tight packed. Lots of transparency, but the thing we really studied here was this brick. We really kind of pushed the envelope on the brick. It's plant sciences, so we wanted a living wall here, but the scientists said, well, we're not going to take care of it. So why would, okay, if you're not going to take care of it, nobody is. So we tried to find a brick that would be organic, and we wanted it green. Michigan State has a brick committee. All brick at Michigan State has to be red. So we wanted to do a green brick, so I had to go to the brick committee and show them how great it was. They approved it, and there it is under construction, so you get this nice glass box of all the laboratories sitting on this green brick. But the coolest part of the brick is its coarseness. It's, again, this brick is double glazed with 2 different colors of green, and it's pre-tumbled, so it gets that kind of thing. So the brick is very organic looking, and when you get close, it's really quite elegant and it's quite beautiful. So when people get close, they touch it and start to really, I think, understand what masonry is really about. Another project at Michigan State that isn't under construction yet but working is the FRIB project. Michigan State won the FRIB, which is the facility for the rare isotope beam. It's the only one in North America. It will, when it's up and running in 2018, make Michigan State #1 on the list for physics research above MIT or any of those other folks in the East. So we are very blessed with that. So what we did is design a brick facade here that we're still working on, but this metal facade that kind of caps it. By the way, Plant Sciences is on the other side of the street. So 2 buildings kind of face each other, create a dialogue with each other. We're using kind of similar detailing in some aspects, but where Plant Sciences was brick with glass, this is brick with metal panel. We developed a Fibonacci pattern for the facade to get this 3-dimensional pattern to sort of identify the way that the beam goes. The target building is over here. And Jeremy did yeoman's duty on trying to figure this out. We now call it the Fibonacci pattern. But Fibonacci is 1, 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, and 8 plus 5 is 13. So all these panels fit within that system, and it works. So it has a very mathematical sense to it, which is what the scientists are, mathematicians, physicists. So they may never understand that, but we like it. And it'll give us a pretty cool facade. Again, 1 window. I don't know what that is, but I get 1 window buildings. Another project at Oakland University, some of you may have seen this going up, the Human Health Building. It's for the nursing school and the physical therapy or health sciences. Kind of a notion here was to create a building that was soft. These are the groups in the medical profession that are very caring and hands-on. So to do a building that would be soft, so we took terracotta and tried to make a very soft expression out of a very technical material. So we've laid it up like a shingle-style house. We had all the terracotta people turn their systems sideways and redo it, so we get no vertical joints in the terracotta, only the horizontals line up, none of the verticals line up. We also restored the wetland here, saved an oak tree at Oakland University. Go figure. So there it is. The oak tree's on the other side, but it's still there. And that's the kind of patterning that's being worked on. So the intent would be to try to do a shingle-style terracotta building. And the terracotta people said, well, how come nobody else thought of this? I don't know, but we did. So that's pretty cool. We've done a couple of art museums. This is the Muskegon Art Museum that's not been built yet, but in addition to Muskegon, Muskegon's on the water, so we have water. We put it on the back side. This is a traditional front side of the building. It's a very traditional building. We added this piece onto the back, which would be over here, and we added the water, so you cross the water to get to the museum. I put this in here because I like it. I think it's a nice design. I wish they would build it. Another building we did was the Sloan Museum in Flint. Again, it didn't get built. I work with Kevin Schultes a lot. You'll see a pattern here, okay? So the Sloan Museum is kind of a car museum. So in Germany, they have these wonderful stacking parking lots, you know, all electronic. So why not put the cars in there, you know, and just stack them there? It's all movement. It's just a parking deck. You can get them down when you want to, but it becomes kind of billboardish for the museum. The building is, the museum doesn't want to necessarily be a car museum only. It's a heritage museum. It's kind of a little bit schizophrenic, so it's got a slice in the middle, and there's kind of two parts. One is very open, the other is very closed. We got places for them to show their cars and stuff, dealing with the site. Again, funding. We need funding for the arts. Lastly, the National Hurricane Museum, a great opportunity to work down in Louisiana for a group trying to fund the National Hurricane Museum. Their funding is still underway, but the idea here is to try to capture the power of the museum, or the power of the hurricane as it comes ashore. It's designed to withstand a Category 5 hurricane, so if anyone's worrying about that. So what you see on those forms are basically the wave forms. If you're in a hurricane or know people who are in a hurricane, it's typically not the wind that's the biggest problem. It's the water that comes ashore. And so we tried to capture that power so that you're always being confronted with it, as well as trying to create an iconic waterfront for Lake Charles, Louisiana. And then lastly, I want to end on this project. Carl Rowling told me he thought this was the project that explains my design intent best. As part of the National Hurricane Museum, we were asked to do a memorial at Cameron, Louisiana. Cameron, Louisiana is right on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. And in 1957, Hurricane Audrey blew ashore and wiped out the town. Over 500 people died, most of them children. The few buildings that were standing was one, this courthouse, but just about everything else looks like that. If you look at the pictures that came from this is what it looks like. So they wanted to do a memorial for the tragedy that beset Cameron. And as you start to look, and you see these photos, and they did a documentary of this, Everything's Over But the Cry. It's pretty tear-jerking. I mean, these are the open graves for all the people. So when you start thinking about that and thinking about what do you do, how do you do this, and you're doing your research, you notice that all the buildings are gone, but the live oak trees stand. They're still there. And as we read through some of the documentaries, people survived by hanging on to the branches of these trees. And there's quite a series of that. The water surge from Hurricane Audrey was 12 feet. So think of water coming through your town 12 feet high. The first floor of your house is completely submerged, as are most of the seconds and thirds. So we thought that we should honor that and plant 500 live oak trees in a rigid grid in Cameron, as one representing each life. And then through that, run a pathway with the stories engraved in granite on that pathway of the people who survived, to tell the story for those who couldn't. And then in the middle, create a hollow that the pathway doesn't go through but circumvents around, so there is a place of contemplation. And it's architecture to me, and it's architecture that's living, because the trees create building, they create edges, they create mass. The pathway creates opportunity and ways to move through, and it's about space and form. It's all about all that, but it's done with actual trees. This was the only time I did a presentation where the clients were crying at the end of it. And I probably should have just, how much money? Just hand it, because they wanted to do this. So I don't know where this is going to go. Kevin and I kind of think it's probably going to go to there, and that's it. But I think it pretty much speaks to really what I've done in my career.
Thank you, Paul. So before we lose all the students to go back to their studios, would there be time for maybe a couple of questions? Any questions for Paul? Questions? All right, question.
I didn't show the house because it isn't photographed.
The building you're doing in China, there was a form that was kind of off to the side by the entry, and it had a spherical shape that was kind of, it looked like it had
A dome.
almost, yeah. What is there, what's the significance of that, or what's that space?
Yeah. It's an evaluation dome. Back in the 50s, Aero Saarinen did the GM Tech Center, and Smith Group was privileged to work with Saarinen's group and did all the documentation. And if you're really coming to Cranbrook and researching some of that and understanding what happened through the archives, that dome is the perfect space to get a shadowless environment to look at the fit and finish of automobiles. And so it's a perfect place for evaluation of automobiles. And everybody has a dome of some sort or something like that so they can evaluate automobiles. So we thought that they needed one in China, and then we wanted to express it, so we stuck it next to the water and over to the side and became kind of an artwork. But it is for evaluating their cars before they put them into production.
Another question? Just before all the students get out of here, let me ask you maybe the final question. I couldn't help but notice from your presentation that either you just love to draw or you lack computer skills. I'm not sure which it is.
Or both.
Or both. But how important is it for the students that are graduating today? We know they're all going to have computer skills, but how important is it for them to have hand graphic skills as well?
Well, you know, I get asked that a lot because I draw, I scribble basically. I think when I draw, so for me, that's the only time I can really, there's no time to think anywhere else. So I do a lot of scribbling and thinking as I'm scribbling, and I throw away a lot of onion skin. I think other people might have a different way of designing. A lot of people in our office do things on the computer that I can't even dream of doing. They can create forms that, you know, I've never even seen before. So I think there's possibilities both ways. I tend to draw. That's how I was taught, and I'll go down that way.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Paul, and once again, congratulations. Paul Urbanek, 2011 Alumnus of the Year.